You are looking at a live view of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket as we prepare to launch the SXM-10 mission from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida in just under 10 minutes from now. My name is Soumi Srivastava, and I'm a heat shield engineer here at SpaceX.
And I'm Corey Brendel, a senior software engineer, and we are joining you live from SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. Welcome to our live launch coverage delivering a geostationary communication satellite to orbit on behalf of our customer, Sirius XM. SXM-10 is the latest high-powered satellite joining Sirius XM's fleet and will help provide continuous, reliable delivery of Sirius XM's audio, entertainment, and information services to consumers in the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean. There are more than 165 million Sirius XM-equipped vehicles on the road today that rely on Sirius XM's proprietary satellite network.
At just under T-minus 10 minutes tonight, everything is looking good for an on-time liftoff, and the range is ready to support. We have been watching weather conditions all night, but it seems to be working in our favor.
If for any reason we are unable to launch today, a backup opportunity is available tomorrow at the same time. And with that, let's take a moment to learn a bit more about the Falcon 9 supporting today's mission. Falcon 9 is the world's first orbital-class reusable rocket. Reusability allows SpaceX to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, which in turn drives down the cost of space access.
The two-stage rocket stands 229 feet tall and generates more than 1.7 million pounds of thrust at sea level. The bottom two-thirds of the vehicle is the first stage, which is also referred to as the booster. After liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage accelerates through the thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere and into space using its 9 Merlin M1D engines.
After stage separation, today the booster will land on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, which is currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. This particular booster will be returning to Earth for its 8th time.
Above the first stage is the second stage, powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine that ignites after it separates from the first stage. The Merlin vacuum engine, or MVac for short, is optimized for the vacuum of space and is what will carry today's payload to orbit.
The second stage engine can be restarted multiple times to place multiple payloads into different orbits. Tonight we will light and shut down our MVac engine twice before deploying the SXM-10 satellite. And located above the second stage is the payload fairing, which is the large barrel structure at the top of the rocket.
At 17 feet in diameter, the carbon composite fairing is made up of two halves that protect the satellites on their way to orbit. The two halves are then jettisoned approximately 3 minutes into flight.
The fairing halves supporting today's mission are both flight-proven, with one half flying for its 21st time and the other for its 5th time. After separation from the second stage, both fairing halves will return to Earth to be retrieved by our recovery ship, Doug.
While the countdown continues, here's a video from Maxar Space Systems, the manufacturer of the SXM-10 satellite.
At just about T-minus 6 minutes and 35 seconds here, Falcon 9 is tracking no issues and our payload is healthy. Falcon 9 has been loading propellant since T-minus 35 minutes and will finish loading at T-minus 2 minutes.
And if for some reason we do not launch today, we have a backup opportunity
Stage 1
tomorrow.
RP1 load is complete.
Tomorrow at 11:19 p.m. Eastern Time.
Next up, the transporter erector, or TE, will retract away from Falcon. That's the large truss structure you see there next to the rocket. First, we'll see the clamps open around the second stage, and then the TE will begin to pull away from the rocket.
The white clouds that you see around the vehicle are formed by the chilled gas from the LOX tank that we vent overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. And when that vented super chilled oxygen meets the warmer outside air at the Cape, it condenses into the clouds that you're seeing. So those clamp arms will begin to open in about 40 seconds from now, and then
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strongback retract.
Good callouts there, where the tanks are pressurizing for strongback retract. After the clamp arms will open, the strongback will retract away from the vehicle.
Strongback retract has started.
So we have a great view there of the clamp arms opening up. Shortly after this, we will see the strongback begin to pull away from the vehicle. The first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the TE, but the structure is hinged and will tract away from the vehicle in preparation for launch. We use the TE both to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. The TE is also what we use to route the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and payload until liftoff. You can see on your screen the strongback slowly beginning to pull away.
At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Both first stage and second stage should finish loading propellant about a minute apart from each other. The first stage is finishing up at T-3 minutes, and as mentioned earlier, we'll expect to hear that second stage fuel completion call out at T-2 minutes. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. Just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the M1D engines for liftoff.
The satellite continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is still looking green, and the range is ready to support our T0 of 12:54 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, we are proceeding.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Great call out there. And we're proceeding into the last few minutes of terminal count.
Gas launch closeout.
And we got a good call out there. And again, those white clouds you see venting are totally nominal. That's just venting the TE liquid oxygen line.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And we just heard that call out. F9 is in startup.
Launch director, go for launch.
And there you heard the launch director give the final go for launch. At this point, all systems are a go for launch of Falcon 9.
T minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Sirius.
Vehicles pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 32 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. In just a few seconds, we'll throttle the engines down in preparation for max Q, which is a period of maximum aerodynamic
Power and
pressure
telemetry nominal
on the vehicle.
We just heard that good call out. Now during ascent, we tilt the engines, which is also known as gimbaling, and that turns the rocket horizontally. It's what we call a gravity turn. So at this point, the vehicle is still going up, but now we are
Falcon 9
also...
is supersonic.
We just heard that supersonic call out, but now we are also heading horizontally away from the launch pad.
Max Q.
So the rocket has now just passed through max Q, where it experiences the greatest mechanical stress in flight. The rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and get into orbit. You can keep an eye on the Stage 1 telemetry on the bottom of your screen.
MVAC
Now we have several events coming up in quick succession, and we should hear all of these called out by mission control, starting with main engine cutoff, or MECO, then stage separation, SES-1, and fairing separation. MECO is where we shut down all 9 M1D engines on the first stage. Stage separation is when the first and second stages of Falcon separate from one another.
And second engine start 1, or SES-1, is when we'll light the MVAC engine on the second stage for the first time. Less than a minute after that, the fairing will then jettison from the second stage, as it's no longer needed to protect the payload once we're in space. So keep an eye out for these events that are going to happen back to back, all coming up in about 15 seconds from now.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And there you heard and saw those events that happened back to back, which again were MECO, stage separation, and SES-1. Next up will be fairing separation, coming up in about 20 seconds here.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there we heard fairing separation confirmed and saw that fairing separating. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we will be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves again once they fall back to Earth. They will be taken back to shore by our ocean recovery vessel, Doug.
It's now T plus 4 minutes and 17 seconds into today's mission. At about T plus 6 minutes, you should see on your screen the first
Both
stage
vehicles are on nominal trajectories.
The first stage is entry burn. Great call out there. To start the entry burn, we will relight 3 M1D engines, starting with the center engine, known as E9, followed shortly after by the E1 and E5 engines, which is similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. We need to slow down to reduce re-entry forces, which then helps us recover and reuse the first stage.
During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we are still moving really fast. This causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also known as the rocket's plume, which deposits a layer of soot onto the vehicle's surface.
That soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and with each flight, the soot builds up a little bit more on the outside of the vehicle. And oftentimes, prior to launch, you can see that soot from prior flights on the first stage.
Now, as you can see on your screen, the second stage is still picking up speed and heading to its destined orbit. We're going just over 13,000 kilometers an hour here. We've got just about another 20 seconds here until that entry burn starts, which typically lasts for about 20 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
So engines 1, 5, and 9 have all relit for the entry burn. The Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting today's mission is performing this entry burn for its 8th time. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investments in critical scientific research.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level. These achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. At liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage has thrust greater than 5 747 airplanes at full power. The MVAC engine, which has a much wider nozzle than the M1D, is optimized to 220,000 pounds of thrust in vacuum.
Coming up next, we will start our landing burn on the first stage, followed quickly by MVAC engine shutdown on the second stage. During the landing burn, only the center engine, engine 9,
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
will be used to land the
Stage 1
vehicle
transonic.
on the drone ship. So that should be starting up in about 20 seconds from now.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Landing lead deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed. Nominal orbit insertion.
So we just had confirmation of nominal orbital insertion for the second stage.
And with that successful landing of the booster, this was the 8th launch and landing for this first stage, which previously launched Crew 9, RRT-1, Firefly Blue Ghost Mission 1, From 2, and 3 Starlink missions.
So with that, stage 2 is embarking on its coast phase, after which the MVAC engine will relight for a second time at about T plus 26 minutes. And that will be followed by payload deploy.
We're going to take a quick break here and leave you with some nice space tunes. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Welcome back to live coverage of the SXM-10 mission. We've had a great mission so far with an on-time liftoff at 12:54 a.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. After a successful stage separation, the first stage returned to Earth with a precision landing on our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. And just before the break, we had confirmation of nominal orbital insertion.
Coming up next, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will reignite for the second time. You might hear it referred to as SES-2. We're listening in now for that call out.
MVAC ignition.
And we heard that call out for MVAC ignition. So now this burn will last a little more than 1 minute before the second stage engine shuts down for a second time, also known as SECO-2. After that, we'll have another coast phase, which will last just a few minutes as the second stage prepares to deploy the SXM-10 satellite. Now, if you're just tuning in, as a reminder, our customer for tonight's mission is Sirius XM, the leading audio entertainment company in North America, which has a portfolio of audio businesses, including its flagship subscription entertainment service, Sirius XM.
MVAC shutdown.
And with that second shutdown of the MVAC engine, the second stage is going to coast for about 6 minutes. We're going to take a short break for that coast, and we'll be back for deployment of the SXM-10 satellite. See you in a couple.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the SXM-10 mission. Before the break, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage reignited and burned for a little more than a minute before successfully shutting down for the second time.
And now we're less than a minute away from expected payload deploy, which we should be able to see as it happens. As a reminder, our customer for tonight's mission is Sirius XM. SXM-10 is the latest high-powered satellite joining Sirius XM's fleet, following up the SXM-9 satellite, which was launched by SpaceX 6 months ago. We have a great view of the payload and should have a great view of payload deploy in just a couple seconds from now.
Sirius XM-10 payload deploy confirmed.
And we just heard the call out, and there you can see successful deployment of the SXM-10 geostationary communications satellite.
Incredible view there. And that will wrap up tonight's live coverage of the SXM-10 mission. All of us here at SpaceX want to thank our customer, Sirius XM. We also want to thank the Eastern Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. If you're interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. And remember to follow @SpaceX on X. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.